was easier to breathe. It was a terrible position, for the blacks, encouraged by their success, piled on more and more brushwood and the great fronds of fern which grew in abundance on the sides of the little ravine, and as the green boughs and leaves were thrown on they hissed and spluttered and sent forth volumes of smoke which choked and blinded us till the fuel began to blaze, when it roared into the cave and brought with it a quantity of hot but still breathable air. "Keep a good heart, my lad," said the doctor. "No, no, Penny. Are you mad? Lie down, lie down. Don't you know that while the air high up is suffocating, that low down can be breathed?" "No, I couldn't tell," said Jack Penny dolefully, as he first knelt down, then laid his head close to the ground. "I didn't know things were going to be so bad as this, or I shouldn't have come. I don't want to have my dog burned to death." Gyp seemed to understand him, for he uttered a low whine and laid his nose in his master's hand. "Burned to death!" said the doctor in a tone full of angry excitement. "Of course not. No one is going to be burned to death." Through the dim choking mist I could see that there was a wild and anxious look in the doctor's countenance as he kept going near the mouth of the cave and then hurrying back, blinded and in agony. We had all been in turn to the narrow rift at the end through which we had been able to see the sky and the waving leaves of the tree, but now all was dark with the smoke that rolled out. This had seemed to be a means of escape, but the difficulty was to ascend the flat chimney-like place, and when the top was reached we feared that it would only be for each one who climbed out to make himself a mark for the savages' arrows. Hence then we had not made the slightest attempt to climb it. Now, however, our position was so desperate that Jimmy's proposal was listened to with eagerness. "Place too much big hot," he said. Choke 'em like wallaby. Go up." He caught hold of the doctor's scarf of light network, a contrivance which did duty for bag, hammock, or rope in turn, and the wearer rapidly twisted it from about his waist. "Now, Mass Jack Penny, stand here," he cried, and Jack was placed just beneath the hole. Jack Penny understood what was required of him, and placing his hands against the edge of the rift he stood firm, while Jimmy took the end of the doctor's scarf in his teeth and proceeded to turn him into a ladder, by whose means he might get well into the chimney-like rift, climb up, then lower down the scarf rope to help the rest of us. As I expected, the moment Jimmy caught Jack Penny's shoulders and placed one foot upon him, my companion doubled up like a jointed rule, and Jimmy and he rolled upon the floor of the cave. At any other time we should have roared with laughter at Jimmy's disgust and angry torrent of words, but it was no time for mirth, and the doctor took Jack Penny's place as the ladder drawled out. I couldn't help it, my back's so weak. I begin to wish I hadn't come. "Dat's fine," grunted Jimmy, who climbed rapidly up, standing on the doctor's shoulders, making no scruple about placing a foot upon his head, and then we knew by his grunting and choking sounds that he was forcing his way up. The moment he had ceased to be of use, the doctor stood aside, and it was as well, for first a few small stones fell, then there was a crash, and I felt that Jimmy had come down, but it only proved to be a mass of loose stone, which was followed by 2 or 3 more pieces of earth and rock. Next came a tearing sound as of bushes being broken and dragged away, and to our delight the smoke seemed to rush up the rift with so great a current of air that fresh breath of life came to us from the mouth of the cave, and with it hope. In those critical moments everything seemed dreamlike and strange. I could hardly see what took place for the smoke, my companions looking dim and indistinct, and somehow the smoke seemed to be despair, and the fresh hot wind, borne with the crackling flames that darted through the dense vapour, so much hope. "Ti-hi come 'long next 'em," whispered Jimmy, and the black ran to the opening eagerly, but hesitated and paused, ending by seizing me and pushing me before him to go first. "No, no," I said. "Let's help the wounded man first." "Don't waste time," said the doctor angrily. "Up, Joe, and you can help haul." I obeyed willingly and unwillingly, but I wasted no time. With the help of the doctor and the scarf I had no difficulty in climbing up the rift, which afforded good foothold at the side, and in less than a minute I was beside Jimmy, breathing the fresh air and seeing the smoke rise up in a cloud from our feet. "Pull," said the doctor in a hoarse whisper that seemed to come out of the middle of the smoke. Jimmy and I hauled, and somehow or another we got Jack Penny up, choking and sneezing so that he was obliged to lie down amongst the bushes, and I was afraid he would be heard, till I saw that we were separated from the savages by a huge mass of stony slope. Two of the black bearers came next easily enough, and then the scarf had to be lowered down to its utmost limits. I knew why, and watching the proceedings with the greatest concern as Jimmy and one of the blacks reached down into the smoky rift and held the rope at the full extent of their arms. "Now," said the doctor's voice, and the two hardy fellows began to draw the scarf, with its weight coming up so easily that I knew the doctor and one of the blacks must be lifting the wounded man below. Poor fellow, he must have suffered the most intense agony, but he did not utter a sigh. Weak as he was quite conscious of his position, and helped us by planting his feet wherever there was a projection in the rift, and so we hauled him up and laid him on the sand among the bushes, where he could breathe, but where he fainted away. The rest easily followed, but not until the doctor had sent up every weapon and package through the smoke. Then came his turn, but he made no sign, and in an agony of horror I mastered my dread and, seizing the scarf, lowered myself down into the heat and smoke. It was as I feared. He had fainted and was lying beneath the opening. My hands trembled so I could hardly tie a knot, but knowing as I did how short the scarf was, I secured it tightly round one of his wrists and called to them to haul, just as Jimmy was coming down to my help. He did not stop, but dropped down beside me, and together we lifted the fainting man, called to them to drag, and he was pulled up. "Here, catch hold," came from above the next moment in Jack Penny's voice, and to my utter astonishment down came the end of the scarf at once, long before they could have had time to untie it from the doctor's wrist. "Up, Jimmy!" I cried, as I realised that it was the other end Jack Penny had had the nous to lower at once. "No, shan't go, Master Joe Carstairs." "Go on, sir!" I cried. "No, shan't. Devil, devil, devil!" he cried, pushing me to the hole. To have gone on fighting would have meant death for both, for the savages were yelling outside and piling on the bushes and fern fronds till they roared. I caught the scarf then, and was half hauled, half scrambled up, to fall down blinded and suffocated almost, only able to point below. I saw them lower the scarf again, and after what seemed a tremendous time Jimmy's black figure appeared. Almost at the same moment there were tongues of flame mingled with the smoke, and Jimmy threw himself down and rolled over and over, sobbing and crying. "Burn 'em, hot 'em! Oh, burn 'em, burn 'em, burn 'em!" There was a loud roar and a rush of flame and smoke out of the rift, followed by what seemed to be a downpour of the smoke that hung over us like a canopy. just as if it was all being sucked back, and then